Hello, so we looked at 1914 to 1925, and we categorized our milestones into 7 categories. So we had urban planning, economics, land use, demographics, transportation, politics and governance, and events. Just to save time, I won't read these all out, but we looked at everything that happened, and then we narrowed it down to our milestones. And Matt will tell you about our first one.
So our first one is the Shaughnessy Heights Act. Shaughnessy Heights Act really helps to ensure the neighborhood character of Shaughnessy as we see it today. Its main purpose was to limit the construction on lots in Shaughnessy to single-family residential buildings. Although there was some other things in 1922, it would be amended to prevent the subdividing of lots and limit lots to only one house. It really helped to reinforce and preserve Shaughnessy as we know it now. And for this reason, it remains one of the most affluent neighborhoods in Vancouver. Just a quote from the original document outlining it. A lot may be used only for residential purposes, during which period there shall be erected upon the said area any other buildings than private dwelling houses, either with or without stables, garages, coach houses, greenhouses, and necessary outbuildings. A flat or apartment building or any other building constructed to accommodate more than one household shall not be deemed to be a private dwelling house within the meaning of this clause. And so that brings us to the recession in World War I, started in 1913, with the recession running through 1918, the end of World War I. The recession caused a major decrease in the amount of building permits issued in Vancouver. Then the war continued this on, extending this period of decline throughout the war. I would also see Vancouver's population decrease for the first time in 22 years, starting with the recession and continuing throughout World War I. One of the interesting things here is military units were arranged primarily by geography. So if a military unit went into battle and lost that battle where most of the units were killed, that could be an entire street or 2 streets or neighborhood in Vancouver that would be extremely decimated by this. So this is a graph from Bruce McDonald's Vancouver Visual History, just showing the drastic decline in building permit value and the decline in population as well. And the Panama Canal opens in 1914. This drastically changed the way goods would be moved across the continent. Vancouver is one of only 3 really primary natural deep water ports on the west coast at that time. The other 2 were in California, and so the Panama Canal allowed goods to be shipped from New York to San Francisco in a third of the time that it did before. And this really helped to establish Vancouver as the primary western city in Canada. Up until now, it was Winnipeg. Everything was being moved by rail, and Winnipeg's location in the center of the continent made it the hub for just about all rail traffic. So there's a quote here describing Winnipeg. All roads lead to Winnipeg. It's a gateway through which the commerce of the east and west and north and south must flow. No city in America, at least, has such absolute and complete command over the wholesale trade of so vast an area. It is destined to become one of the greatest distributing commercial centers of the continent, as well as a manufacturing community of great importance. And we see that didn't really play out, the opening of the Panama Canal. By the end of that decade, by the end of 1920, fully 40% of Canada's grain exports were going through British Columbia, almost all of it through Vancouver. And so this is sort of reflected in the population of Winnipeg and Vancouver at the time. Vancouver starts to overtake Winnipeg shortly after the opening of the canal, and it just continues upwards while Winnipeg really starts to plateau. And that becomes even more drastic when you start to look at the urban area population instead of just the city proper.
Next, we talk about the Georgian Viaduct. So that was built in 1913 to 1915. The viaduct was built to provide a connection between Beatty Street and Main Street. The immediate impact is that it cut off the waterfront from parts of downtown, but it provided easier automobile access into downtown. There was a lot of lasting impacts. So in 1958, a study states that the viaduct was going to fall down and needed to be replaced as soon as possible. This led This, along with the Vancouver transportation study, led to a lot of public protests because the plan was to destroy many parts of East Van, such as Chinatown, and the communities did not want this. And now it acts as a physical and psychological barrier for Chinatown, Gastown, Strathcona, and other parts of East Vancouver. So this is the viaduct. It's by the BC Place and Rogers Center. And there's a construction, the opening of the viaduct. This is one of the highway plans, and it connects to the viaduct and the demolition. Next is the University of British Columbia, and originally it was at the Vancouver Hospital lands, which was known as the Shacks. It started construction in 1914 at the Point Grey campus, but that was ended due to World War I, and the campus was just left bare with only one building. After the war, the Shacks became overcrowded as all the students returned, and classes were being held in tents. So in 1922, there was the Great Trek, which was a protest of students that marched through Vancouver to the Point Grey campus, asking the government to pay to resume construction, which was granted. And in 1925, Point Grey campus was officially opened. So the immediate impact of this was that it created a major node. And the lasting impact is that UBC is one of the largest employers in Vancouver. It has a $12.5 billion in economic impact. But due to the separation from the city center, there's major transit issues. So there's the 90-10 model, which is 90% of traffic is going one way, 10% is going the other way. So there's a lot of concerns about this. And also due to its isolated nature, there's not a lot of affordable housing around UBC. So this was the proposed plan for the campus, which is basically what exists now. Beside that, that's the clearing of the campus, so you could tell it was a dense forest, like Pacific Spirit Park. This is the Great Trek. This image shows the 90-10 model. So at 8:30 in the morning, everyone is coming to campus, and only a little bit of people are leaving. This image shows the old location, UBC and Simon Fraser, and it's interesting to see that both the universities are so far away from the city center, and this kind of shows what could have happened or how transit would differ if the campus stayed at the Vancouver Hospital site. So Point Grey Towning bylaw, they were the first city or town in North America to pass a towning bylaw. It divides Point Grey into industrial, commercial, and residential uses. The immediate impact was that the primary goal of the bylaw was to preserve integrity of Point Grey's existing residential neighborhoods. It defined how future development would occur. It was also criticized, saying that council was attempting to exercise miscellaneous bylaws through town planning. And the lasting impact was in 1926, the Court of Appeal found that the entire bylaw was invalid, which led to the creation of the Town Planning Act. And this plaque shows that Point Grey passed the first zoning bylaw, but they wrote Canada's, but I think they should change it to write North America's, because that's a bigger accomplishment.
So in 1923, British Columbia Electric Railroad introduces the first city bus. The immediate impacts of this were not as drastic as a lot of the milestones. One of the key features it did have, though, is that the buses were able to travel longer distances, and they were able to adapt more to development and change routes. The lasting impact, though, is this can be seen as the beginning of the end for the streetcar, which had greatly impacted Vancouver's development to this point. The streetcar, especially its arterial lines, were laid out and development would follow, and they would be a catalyst for development in many areas. And with the bus, this was no longer the case. A lot of times, the development could happen first, and the bus could be brought in very quickly afterwards. So you can see the map of the streetcar arterials, and you can see how development, as we know in Vancouver now, has really followed along those. And then some images of some of the first BCER buses on Grandview Highway.
And lastly is the Pacific Highway 15. So originally it was known as Gill Road, and in 1923 it was paved from a gravel road. It's located in Surrey, and it's important because it is the main highway to get to Washington. The immediate impact was by the late 20s, over 300,000 Americans were coming from Seattle, Bellingham to Vancouver. And this influenced the switch of driving from the left side of the road to the right. And the lasting impact is it opened up a lot of economic and trade opportunities, which rise with the freight transportation. Truck. And then now over 3,000 trucks per day cross the border there. So as you can see, that was the gravel road, then it was paved, and that's where it's located in Surrey.
So our last one is the Town Planning Act in 1925. The Town Planning Act gave municipalities in British Columbia the authority to prepare official town plans, as well as plans for harbors, rapid transit, and street railway. In addition, municipalities can now designate zoning, enforce regulations, consider any matter dealing with physical development of the community. The immediate impact is that the Vancouver Town Planning Commission is set up in the following year, and it's had immense lasting impact. The creation of the Town Planning Commission has gone on to influence just about every asset or every bit of development since then, and so we'll leave that to the group after us to discuss the Town Planning Commission in 1926.
And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.